one of my favorite senators, George Borrello, will be on the show today. We'll be talking about the New York State budget, a $277 billion budget. So we'll be talking about that. I want to introduce Senator Borrello to you, with those of you who are not familiar with him, although he's been on this show on a number of times. But Senator Borrello was born in Silver Creek in Fredonia, New York, graduated from Fredonia High School, graduated from Purdue University, was involved in the businesses for a number of years, an entrepreneur, someone who signed the front of the paychecks, not the back of a paycheck. And then in 2010, he was elected to the Chautauqua County Legislature, and he served in the legislature from 2010 to 2017. In 2018, he became the Chautauqua County Executive and served as the executive in 2018 and 2019. And then when the seat opened, when Catherine Young retired from the Senate, he won a primary, and then won the race, and he's been our New York State Senator from 2019 to the present. So welcome, George. Welcome to the show.
It's good to be back on with you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for having me on.
So we've got a lot to talk about today. The budget, this crazy budget that grows leaps and bounds every single year. It is amazing to me that, how it's grown, how the money is being spent, and how the pandering continues. I mean, how Hochul is just sending money everywhere because it's an election year.
No doubt about it. First and foremost, let's not forget the fact that this was the latest budget in almost 2 decades. We did not pass a budget. It was supposed to happen April 1st, and it was after June 1st before we passed the budget.
Right.
And, Kathy Hochul has never seen an on-time budget. It's just she is inept, she's weak, and the Democrats that control the legislature take advantage of that. Let's make that clear first. And secondly, this is an election year for the governor, so she's buying votes $1 billion at a time using our money. From a $8 billion with a B bailout of New York City to handing out money to so many organizations, bribe after bribe in order to try to get herself reelected. Yet the people of New York State are miserable. Poll after poll shows that most people have no faith in the governor. Most people have no faith in the leadership of the legislature. And despite the fact that we spend more per capita than any other state in the nation, New Yorkers are not prospering. So it's a lot of money spent without a lot of return.
So tell me this. It used to be they talked about 3 men in a room. Are the Republicans in the room anymore?
Well, no. Now, since the Republicans lost the majority before my time there, back in 2019, it's one-party Democrat rule. And it's 3 people in a room, but I don't care if it's are men or women. In this case, 2 women and a man. It's about the fact that one party has the control of every statewide elected office, and our budget has skyrocketed, has ballooned $100 billion since that has happened. And that $268.5 billion budget that was passed has now all of a sudden, that they've actually looked into the numbers, because, again, this was irresponsibly rushed, has now ballooned up another $9 billion. It's $277 billion.
Wow.
We just heard from the state comptroller that you're talking over a $35 billion budget deficit that's going to be looming. So this is an election year budget, and it's going to be at the expense of the taxpayers of New York State.
So the reality is our side, the conservative Republican side, doesn't really get a chance to put any real input into the budget, doesn't get a chance to really present something for the budget. And the Democrats have total control. They have the supermajority in both houses, and they have the governorship. So we're at a substantial disadvantage until we're able to change that at the booth, at the voting booth.
Well, yes, but let me just correct you. Last cycle, we did break the supermajority in the Senate, and that's by one seat.
Okay.
So it's critical that we elect more Republicans. And I bring that up because we have a real opportunity here to elect Bruce Blakeman as governor. And as long as we maintain the numbers that we have in the New York State Senate and grow them, and with a Republican governor, we can make substantial change because the Democrats will not have the ability to override a governor's veto, and that will provide huge leverage. So I don't care if you're a Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative, you should want to restore balance to our government because this one-party Democrat rule has been an absolute unmitigated disaster. So, we truly have an opportunity. Bruce Blakeman was down in my district yesterday, touring Cattaraugus County. He's been around the state. He needs to get to know more people, but I think once you meet him, he's a great leader, and we have an opportunity to restore that balance by electing a Republican governor.
He certainly is a great leader. He's done an excellent job in Nassau. There's no question about it. He certainly knows how to articulate his arguments. I totally agree with you. We do need to have a Republican governor. It'll be the first Republican governor since Pataki. It's been a long, long, long time. It will restore some balance to New York State. And, let's talk a little bit about, again, go back to this budget, how it's grown over the last decade, but certainly even over just the term that Hochul has been governor.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, but $100 billion more. So think about that. It was about $170 billion in 2019, the last time the Republicans were in the room. And now it's gone up over $100 billion. But just under Kathy Hochul's watch, she blames the pandemic and she blames the federal government. But the reality is that we have overspent and we have not addressed the fraud, waste, and abuse in that budget, which has skyrocketed. Medicaid now makes up almost half of the budget, $126 billion with a B out of a now $277 billion budget is just Medicaid. And there are massive amounts of fraud. And that's not just me saying it. It's the state comptroller, a fellow Democrat, has been calling out the fraud, waste, and abuse in the system for years. Good government groups like the Empire Center and people who study this. And the governor has done nothing about it. Why? Because her campaign supporters profit from that fraud, waste, and abuse. She's laundering money from the taxpayers through the Medicaid fraud and other fraudulent programs that end up getting kicked back to her. Perfect example of that is the Medicaid non-emergency transportation. All these taxi drivers down in my district that are taking people to non-emergency appointments and getting paid $300, $400, $500 for one trip for one person. And the transportation brokers are profiting from that, and they are donating big to Kathy Hochul and the Democrats. It is the most egregious pay-to-play scheme out there.
It's incredible what goes on, and if you start to take it apart piece by piece, you wonder why anybody would continue these people in power. But the problem is people don't realize it. They don't know about it. Our people that I consider to be on the conservative end, they want to go to work. They want to take care of their family. They're not that heavily involved in politics, and so they just almost give up and think that there's no solution, but there is a solution. And as you said, Bruce Blakeman was the solution this year, and we need more people in the Senate. We need to elect more senators. We certainly need to elect more assembly people. We have in our district Pat Jasinski, who was one of only two assemblymen who was able to defeat an incumbent Democrat 2 years ago. We need to keep these people in office and increase those numbers. But getting back to the budget and the pandering that takes place, $3 billion to provide inflation refund checks to 8.6 million New Yorkers. So she wants to buy us with $500 for joint filers and $300 for single filers. But that's only one of the giveaways, right?
Yeah, in fact, the number is even less than that. That was the previous tax rebate check.
Okay.
It's actually only about $100 to $150 that most people are going to get. And at the same time, Democrats rejected our proposal to suspend the gasoline tax right now, which would have saved households much more money. and you wouldn't have had to send a check out. You know what's going to cost to send those checks out? It's just so we can have a check show up in somebody's mailbox that says it has Kathy Hochul's signature on it. It's all political. That $100 billion that's going to be budgeted for that, it's going to cost another $10 billion to deliver that money. Between the bureaucracy and the cost of postage and everything else. These are just, again, election year tricks, and I hope that New Yorkers don't fall for it. I mean, look at the pain that people are suffering every time they open up their utility bills, and the fact that they continue to skyrocket. And they skyrocket because of bad energy policy, because of high taxes on our utilities. And the governor has done nothing about that. They continue to rise because of the boondoggle green energy projects, all the infrastructure that is required to hook up all of these solar panels that you see popping up all over the place like mushrooms. That infrastructure cost is being paid for by the ratepayers. It's hidden in those delivery charges. And I say hidden because when utility companies said that they wanted to line item on everyone's bill the cost of the climate agenda in New York State, the governor and Democrats outlawed it. They said, no, you can't put a line item on there that shows people the cost of their bad energy policy. So they'll yell and scream and lie and pound the table and talk about greedy corporations and holding people accountable. But at the end of the day, it is the Public Service Commission who is controlled by the governor that approves rate increases. It is the Public Service Commission and the governor's own people that have created this boondoggle green energy program that has added to it. It is the New York State Legislature and the Democrats that run it that have continued to burden people with additional taxes on those utility bills. So, folks, if you want a reminder of failed leadership in New York State, you're getting it every month when you open your utility bills.
Certainly, people see it in their utility bills, but we suffer with our gas prices. And while there has been relief in the past, this year they want to keep gas prices up, in my opinion, because they want to hurt Republicans in this election. That happened in the New York State legislature where they refused to put a postponement on the tax on gasoline. It happened in the Erie County legislature where they want to, they don't want to pass. And to me, that's all about the election cycle. That's all about the fact that they want high gas prices so that, that hurts Trump and it hurts Congress and it hurts senators.
You're 100% correct. And they're absolute hypocrites. They did it back in 2022 with suspended the gas tax under the Biden administration. And again, why was gas so high back then? Because we relinquished our energy independence. We stopped producing, stopped exploring for oil and refining gas here. And that's why we were at the mercy of the enemies of the United States, in the Middle East that were for their imported oil. And now we're energy independent. And now the gas prices are high again. They refused to suspend that gas tax while we finish what I believe is an incredibly important mission in Iran to make sure that they never have a nuclear weapon. So in 2022, when the only reason was failed policy at the federal level that we had high gasoline prices, versus now, and they're not willing to make that same effort to save New Yorkers money. And by the way, New York is always at the top end of gasoline prices across the country all the time anyway.
Exactly.
Why? Again, because of high taxes. So the hypocrisy is just absolutely palatable.
It's amazing to me, and we're going to take a short break and then get back to some of these other issues, but it's amazing to me that what they do in the legislature, the state legislature, and I've said this before, we do because we can. We do simply because we have the votes to do it. We do simply because it's politically better for us. It's not about constituents. It's not about what's right for New York State voters. It's not about any of those things. It's about politics. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We're here with Senator George Borrello. We're talking about the recently passed New York State budget, the largesse in that budget. Senator Borrello certainly is going to explain to us some of these pandering that the New York Democrats have done. Look, Senator, I've read that are we going to have free school breakfast now, free school lunch? Is that part of the budget? Yes,
and this has been something that has been talked about for a while. There's, but our school budgets continue to go up every year. And look, we want to have our kids educated. We want to have them well fed. And I think everyone agrees with that. But you look at what New York State spends per pupil, it's more than any other state in the nation. And where do our results fall? Well, somewhere in the middle in some cases, the lower half. I hear about one of the things that, I hear from Democrats is, well, we spend a lot of money, but we get, we have the better education than places down south. That's not true. Mississippi has better outcomes than New York State does in most categories. So it's not spending money, and a lot of times that money goes, for wasteful projects. Personally, the idea of providing a good, nutritious meal, I think, is an important thing. But there are so many other things that unfortunately are wasteful that ends up creating, in most cases, the majority of the money that's spent on education in New York State. And again, with mediocre results at that.
Certainly a nutritious meal for our children is important, but somebody has to pay for all these things, and it's a question in my mind of prioritizing. I also read somewhere where it's in the budget to give free diapers for newborn babies. Some of these things just strike me as totally pandering to people, totally pandering to, people who don't want to work for things anymore.
No doubt about it. And they're also, spreading this to colleges now. We want to have free menstrual products, which, of course, we're going to have to go in the men's room as well as the ladies' room.
Crazy.
You're going to have, they want to have, all kinds of free things. But again, this is the socialist, this is the socialist way of doing things.
So that's exactly how it's
more free.
That's exactly how it strikes me. This is just the erosion into socialism. So yeah, it's nice to sound like, okay, we're going to give free diapers, when you have a newborn, or we're going to give free meals to every single child, no matter whether you can afford it or not. It's nice to, I suppose, hear those things, but that's what socialism is. That's the slippery slope to socialism for all these giveaways. New York just continues down that path. The MTA, which is, New York's public transportation, $3 billion, again, to support something that continues to fail, continues to just incur massive debt. How do we do those things?
Well, yeah, first of all, the New York City Mass Transit Authority is the most expensive public transportation system in the world. And it is filled, again, with fraud, waste, and abuse. The last statistic I heard was 40% of people who use the public transportation system in New York City don't pay, 40%. And they expect us, the taxpayers of New York State, to subsidize that. We subsidize just the operating budget. New York State taxpayers subsidize to the tune of over $1 billion. So someone, living in a single-wide trailer in a rural area like I represent, who doesn't have a bus to pick up, let alone a train, is subsidizing people that, in some cases, don't even live in New York State to not pay. And what happened when when the MTA asked for some additional tools to address fare evasion? They wanted to use facial recognition software. So, keep in mind, anyone that's willing to jump the turnstile or something like that is also capable of many other things. So a lot of times they catch real hardened criminals who also are fare evaders. And they outlawed, actually, instead of approving the use of facial recognition software, my Democrat colleagues outlawed it. Because they want criminals to be able to abuse the system. They don't care that we're subsidizing it to the tune of billions of dollars a year. And that's just one example of just egregious, failed socialist policy. And let's not forget one thing. Socialism is not about providing, basics to people. It's about dependence. It's about creating a permanent, dependent class of people in New York State that they can control. And that has been the path for the Democrats, not just here in New York State, but across this country for the last couple decades. How do you keep power? By keeping control over people, by making sure that they cannot make ends meet without the government supporting them. That's the path that we're on here in New York State. And it is a cancer that has metastasized in New York City, and it's spreading throughout this state. Socialism.
That's certainly what I see, and again, all these programs that dole out money, the money has to come from somewhere. So somebody's got to pay the money. It just doesn't come out of the air. You can't just print it. The state has to get it from somewhere. So they get it from people who, unfortunately, are leaving this state. They're leaving this state in droves because of the tax policies of this state, because of how New York handles business. A small percentage of taxpayers actually provide the greater percentage of tax money. A small, very, very small percentage of corporations provide the greater, by far, percentage of corporate tax. We're getting to the smaller and smaller pool to support this largesse.
Absolutely, and as you mentioned, and that's a shrinking tax base. People love to talk about the one percenters and how they hate the one percenters. Well, the top 1% of income earners in New York State pay 40% of the taxes.
Right.
The top 2% pay the vast majority. You have New York State relies heavily on two things: personal income tax and also income from Wall Street. And both of those things are being driven out of New York State. And by the way, other states are welcoming them with open arms. Texas, in particular, right now has been the recipient of the flight out of New York State, the financial industry.
Right.
J.P. Morgan, one of the top in the world. J.P. Morgan now employs more people in Texas than they do in New York. Texas is creating their own stock exchange. They're making it easier for people to do things like something called sovereign lending, where companies bond to provide funding to other countries, which we just passed a bill at the end of the year that's going to drive that industry out of New York State, which is a huge financial hit. And who's going to be left when all of these producers, all of these businesses, all of these taxpayers leave New York State? It's now a burden on the middle class, the people that can't afford to leave. And that's what people don't understand. Government isn't going to get cheaper when these folks who pay the taxes leave. So it's going to continue to get more expensive and continue to be a heavier and heavier burden on our middle class families, the working class, small businesses, the people that are left here to shoulder that burden of this socialist government that we have here in New York State.
It's clear to me that if you're a young individual, you've just graduated from college, or you're a young business guy that's creating a business, this isn't the state for you. And so that's why so many of our young people are leaving. So many of our people who have means, who have wealth, you're certainly not going to die in New York. One thing that shocks me, it's about the estate tax in New York. So if we have an estate tax exemption of $7,350,000. Now, that sounds like an awful lot of money to most of us around here, and it is. But it is not so much money in New York City. There are plenty of apartments that cost that kind of money. So New York has an exemption. If you die in New York, you can exempt up to $7,350,000. But if you have 5% more than that, there is zero exemption, no exemption whatsoever. It's called the cliff. It's totally unusual. It's not what the federal government does. It's not what other states do. So if you have more than 5% above that $7,350,000, you're going to pay a full tax on all of the money. It drives people out. It just clearly pushes people out of New York, and Texas and Florida are the beneficiaries.
No doubt about it. And by the way, one of Zohran Mamdani's big pushes is to lower that $7 million
substantially
down to $750,000.
$750,000.
It's outrageous. It's a death tax. And by the way, let's keep one thing in mind. This is an accumulation of sometimes generational wealth. This is how people have gotten out of poverty. This is how people that came here, our ancestors that came here as immigrants with nothing and broke their backs to provide for their families. And now they want to leave something behind. And we're going to tax something that has already been taxed. Because while people were building that wealth, they also paid tax on that. Income taxes, property taxes.
That's exactly right.
So to tax it again in death is another reason why people are leaving New York State. You can't afford to live here, let alone die here.
My father was second generation. He was, he was first generation born here. 10 kids. My grandparents had 10 kids. Couldn't go to high school. Dropped out of high school. Had to go to work during the Depression. Lied about his age. Went to work at Bethlehem Steel. My grandparents, they had 5 boys in World War II. 5 boys. And, my father was injured in World War II, carried a 40% disability all of his life, made some money, and, because of the hard work, the ethics that those people had, the work ethic, it was education. My parents always taught me it's education and hard work that brings you along. And they want to pass something on to the next generation. And New York is a tough place to accomplish that, especially if Mondami has his way.
Well, yes, and right now, he is, without a doubt, the leading voice in the Democrat Party in New York State. He is the one that is, driving the policies of Kathy Hochul and the Democrats in the legislature. And by the way, he is horribly unqualified. I don't think people understand this. This guy was a joke when he was in Albany. Okay, even the Democrats thought he was a joke. He was too radical. He never showed up. I never even knew who the guy was until he was running for mayor of New York City. But you know what? He smiles. He speaks well. He knows how to hit those nerves. And all of a sudden he's the mayor of the largest city in America, arguably one of the most important cities in the world, and he's already failing at this.
We're here again speaking with Senator George Borrello. We've talked about the budget. We've talked about how out of control the budget is. We talked about how the Democrats do simply because they can, not because there's a need or because they're helping constituents. Now I want to talk, George, about some of the bills that are circulating and in the legislature and have been passed by the legislature. First, I want to talk about physician-assisted suicide. So I know this is a tough issue, but again, this is New York. How do you feel about this physician-assisted suicide bill?
Well, this bill, like every other controversial bill, is one where the goal wasn't to craft a responsible piece of legislation. The goal was to prove that we were more, quote-unquote, progressive than other states. So whatever they did, in the state of Washington, for example, we wanted to make sure that ours was further to the left and more radical, and that's why it's an irresponsible bill. I debated this bill last year at the end of session, and there were so many concerns that we brought up in the debate. For example, quite frankly, the fact that there was no requirement of a mental health evaluation, no in-person evaluation by a doctor, no chain of custody for these deadly drugs. So many other things, and I'm against this. Period. I don't think that the government should be in the business of ending innocent lives. But even for those that support it, it was a horribly irresponsible piece of legislation that could have been abused. And some changes were made. I imagine largely based on the debate that we had. There were amendments that passed this year, but still not enough, in my opinion. And look, you've seen this as a slippery slope. Other countries, for example, where we've gone from just terminally ill patients to people that have chronic disease, people that have autism, mental health issues, and that's the slippery slope that we're on, and that's what I don't think people understand is that this is not just about the terminally ill. And by the way, they say only someone who's been given 6 months or less to live. Well, guess what? Doctors are not good at predicting that. They're only correct 20% of the time.
That's right.
First and foremost, we all know someone who was given 6 months to live, and years later they're still alive.
That's exactly right.
So who is this? It's irresponsible all around.
So I'm totally against this bill. The Conservative Party is totally against this bill. The Catholic Church and religion are totally against this bill. The medical profession are totally against this bill. I can understand in the purest sense that if somebody were under those situations that they might want to contemplate that. But the reality is, because we've had lectures on this, the reality is that pain is not one of the 5 reasons why people do this. It is not about their suffering. It is about their feeling dependent on other people. They don't want to put other people in a tough position. It is about different kinds of things. And as you said, what doctor is good at predicting whether you only have 6 months to live? I certainly know a number of people, actually, who were given a short sentence and who've lived well beyond that. We all know people like that. So in reality, this is a terrible bill from a lot of different points of view. It takes our most vulnerable people who are depressed because they have a terrible medical condition, and it gives them something that God is the one who makes that final decision. I just think this is a terrible bill.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you said, Ralph. But let me add one other thing to it. Someone simply walks into a pharmacy and gets a prescription and walks out with life-ending drugs in their hands, and no one is tracking those drugs.
Right.
We don't know. If you'll never know if the person expired because naturally because of the disease, or if they actually took that medication. And where is that medication afterwards? Someone who has a family member that has a terminal disease, that is a horrible emotional impact on the families as well. Let's not forget. Imagine some teenager who's looking at losing his father or mother, and maybe in a deep depression, and having access to those suicide drugs. Yeah. This is the thing that hasn't been thought out.
And every insurance policy that I've ever seen, by the way, says that if you commit suicide, the insurance policy is not paying. And so what this is not taking into account is those insurance policies that will not pay for the survivor. Again, where we should be spending money is to make sure people aren't in pain. That's what we should be doing. We have hospice. That's where the solutions are, not being able to simply kill yourself, not being able to take your own life. The solutions are with hospice. The solutions are medical treatments that keep us from pain. That's what we should be looking at, not this.
Absolutely. It devalues life at the end of the day, and this is my big problem. Government should not be in this business.
So another bill that has been signed is presented to the governor, but she hasn't acted on it as of yet, is the new boundaries for judicial districts. So obviously, as a lawyer, this is important to me. As someone who has been a judicial delegate for over 30 years, it's important to me. So what they've done now is they've passed a bill, and this is the second time it passed. She didn't sign it the first time, in my opinion, because of the election. But she'll sign it this time if she's successful. And what it does is it creates Erie County as its own judicial district. Now, in doing that, when you look at the numbers, you realize that what this bill does is it creates 3 brand new judicial districts in major cities, which are all Democratic. And so it's creating a monopoly for the Democrats in Erie County to only be able to elect Democratic judges. Something that, we have a balance as things are today because we have the rural counties together with Erie County. But this bill changes that. And one of the other important factors of this bill is the state legislature has seen fit that election law cases go to Erie County. So if election law cases go to Erie County and Erie County becomes its own judicial district with all Democratic judges, things are going to slide that way. This is a terrible bill.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, this is just another example of how Democrats are rigging the judicial system for their political favor. Yeah, so they've done this in the past, but like you said, you brought up an important point, and the law was changed again, 100% by the Democrats. If you're bringing a constitutional question, an election law question, that you can only take it to certain venues,
right.
And the venues, as you pointed out, have been traditionally Democrat venues. They want to rig the system. We've seen this at the Court of Appeals level and at the appellate division, where they've wiped out people that were not conservatives by any stretch of the imagination. They were good jurists who interpreted the law and the Constitution. They wiped them out in favor of lapdog activist judges. And now they want to do the same thing at the state Supreme Court level with this change to the judicial district. So it is absolutely about only electing Democrat judges in places like Erie County, but it's also about ensuring that they will get favorable opinions even at the Supreme Court level for their political agenda, so that they're going to eliminate any potential opposition. It's an egregious attempt to seize control of the judicial branch of government.
So while I was preparing for this show, I ran across another bill, Senate Bill 9316, the Family Law Language Bill. I can't believe what I was reading. So this bill updates New York's family court and child support statutes to replace specific gendered terms with gender-neutral language. Under the text, words like mother are replaced by gestation parent, father with non-gestation parent, and paternity with parentage. Is that a bill?
It's not. It passed.
You got to be kidding me! It passed.
It passed on the last day of session, because again, that's when all the worst stuff happens. The last couple days, in the middle of the night, this whole idea of eliminating the term father and mother. This is that radical left agenda that the vast majority of Americans, and the vast majority of New Yorkers disagree with. Stripping away the words mother and father and replace it with gestational and non-gestational parent. It's just, this should outrage any common sense New Yorker. This is about,
people need to know about this, because this alone, to me, just spells out what the Democrats are, spells out where they're headed, it spells out how socialism and then communism is going to take over the state. How can any reasonable person, anybody around, certainly nobody that I know in Erie County, would accept changing the word mother to the gestation parent?
Well, that's it. This is that radical New York City, this far left agenda, and this is about Kathy Hochul appeasing this group. She has the opportunity now to not sign this, but I will tell you this: this was people. You have Democrats in the state legislature here in Western New York and throughout upstate New York that try to say that they're the moderates, that they don't subscribe to this radical New York City-based agenda. But guess what? Every single Democrat in the New York State Senate voted for this bill. Every single one, to eliminate the term father and mother. So next time they tell you, I don't agree with all that craziness out of New York City, it's not true. And by the way, that's the case for every piece of radical legislation. And even the few times where they vote no, ask them this question: did it change the outcome? And the answer is no. They only vote no when they are allowed to vote no. They're given permission to vote no on some of these radical bills just to save their political hides. In the end, it never changes the outcome. I tell people this all the time. I've been in the New York State Senate for 6 years now. I have voted on literally thousands of bills. Ask me how many times I've seen a Democrat bill fail on the floor of the Senate. The answer is zero. The system is rigged. And this bill is just advancing that radical socialist, gender-neutral agenda that's based in New York City.
Well, I'm going to put out this bill. So you're telling me this bill passed. So every one of our state senators, every one of our assemblymen in this area that we're running against, this is going to be a topic that I'm certainly going to talk about. Look, I appreciate you coming on the show. I appreciate all the information you provided us. It is startling. And it just goes to show you that we need to go to the polls, everyone. We need to vote Republican.